This week we continue with the baffles,
It's fitting really, really nice.
as well as starting in on oil cooling and a few other distractions on Ryan Flies.
At this point, some of you are probably wondering about priming. I don't plan on priming the mating surfaces. I will prime everything, and then actually the plan here is to give it a coat of high temp gloss black, having it match the cylinders. I think it's a good balance between effort and protection and appearance. So after sort of waffling on this in my head for quite some time, it's the path that I landed on. I've been fighting 5 rivets for about 2.5 hours. I don't like how they've come out, but I might just be stuck with them. I'm really upset, and I haven't filmed much of it, but I should have riveted these 2 pieces first and then put this on. I didn't, and I sort of backed myself into a corner, and things just got worse from there. I think I'm just going to wind up having to live with it. On top of all of that, the bottom rivet here was rubbing against the cylinder head. In fact, it scuffed a little bit of the paint, which bums me out even more. So I had to flip it to a countersunk rivet and have the countersunk side on the inside to give it enough clearance. And that was, oh geez. I'm going to turn my attention to the other side and see what I can screw up on that. I'm like halfway through taking video, patting myself on the back, thinking how good this thing looks when I realized I should not have riveted this. Rough day here. That actually has a doubler that's not on these plans because, as I mentioned before, I am switching the side that my oil cooler is on. So I was paying attention to this drawing. I should have realized that I have another part that is incorporated into all of this. So out come those rivets. Those are some of the hardest rivets I've ever had to drill out. Not only are they number 4s, there's relatively zero access, so I had to go at it from both sides. But it looks good as far as, you know, removing rivets goes. I will figure out exactly where that oil cooler doubler, this piece, needs to go so that I can fix this mess up. Sounds like a tomorrow problem. All right, so now's about the time, I think, to figure out where the oil cooler is going to go. That way I can cut the hole in the back of the baffle, I can rivet on that doubler that I was missing, and right everything that was wrong with the world previously. Now, going with my Titan engine requires going with a larger oil cooler. There's a few reasons for this. One, it's got more displacement, albeit like 11 cubic inches more, but it is slightly more. And it puts out slightly more power. Looking at oil coolers, even they will note that if you're going with any engine that's going to be above 180 horse, they're going to recommend you upsize your oil cooler. Continental and Titan similarly recommend at least an 11-row oil cooler. Now, I went a little bigger than that because I'm always just a little bit extra, and I got myself a 13-row oil cooler. Not only does this provide extra cooling, it provides extra problems fitting it in the plane. So in order to get it to fit, we're going to have to find some brackets, and that's where I turned to Show Planes, who have a specialized 13-row oil cooler mount for an RV7A. It doesn't get any more dummy proof than that. There is no fabrication needed. This thing just bolts right up. So what I'm doing now is attaching that to my oil cooler so I can position it on the plane and see where that hole is going to need to be cut in the baffling.
So you may have noticed that I appear to be a little off my game. That's an accurate observation, to say the least. And I would love to tell you that the mistakes stop here, but they don't. They continue through this video and well into the next. And that is a bummer. It's a bummer because this Show Planes oil cooler mount really is a fantastic piece of engineering. I would not want to try to figure out how to mount an oversized oil cooler in this airplane without somebody having done the hard work for me. Now, that's not to say that there aren't some nuances to the install. There absolutely are, and I'm going to point them out as we go through this. But do know that my repeated flubs are in no way an indication of poorly written instructions or unclear direction. It's absolutely not the case. A little bit of context here. You have to install the mounts to the oil cooler. That sets their relation or their position in relation to each other. You then utilize that assembly to install the mounts to the engine mount. That makes sure that, again, the top and bottom oil cooler mount are positioned correctly to be able to hold the oil cooler. Once you have all of that assembled, you can then remove the oil cooler, allowing you to work on the fit of the plenum. A word to the wise. You want to make sure that your oil cooler is positioned both up and down and outboard enough so that it will align with the plenum, the doubler, and eventually that oil cooler door.
So with the mounts clamped on here, I removed the oil cooler, and that allows me to trim the plenum to the oil cooler, getting it to fit. And I've done that, and I've match drilled it, and now I've got to put everything back together so I can cut the baffle. However, I'm stuck in a very all too familiar problem on this project, which is I can't trim the plenum until I fit it, and I can't fit it until I trim it. And it's this back and forth chicken and egg conundrum, and I'm tired of it. My usual method, I think, will be the chosen method here, which is just move very slowly, small steps on the trimming as well as the marking of the baffle to make sure that I don't screw something up, which is what I've been doing all day today. I've got the oil cooler clamped in, sort of skewed one way so I can project where the baffle lands on this plenum. Now, this isn't foolproof. In fact, it's far from it. There's all sorts of ways it can move, and on top of that, the baffling is not actually in the same plane as the oil cooler. Because the oil cooler is attached to the engine mount in the way it is, it's actually more parallel with the firewall than with the baffling. And those two are at about a 2-degree difference according to the instructions. That's to offset P factor. And anyways, it's about as close as I think I'm gonna be able to get it. And I think if I don't quite cut all the way to the line, I can test this theory out and see how it works. There is also some grace in the rubber gasket that goes around here, but I want to get it as close as I can.
I've always dirtied everything that I found. This ain't no difference, so look at you now. And baby, cut yourself loose. Save all the things that I said that night. Playing it cool, but I never got it right. Baby, cut yourself loose. I was mesmerized by your eyes. You keep me up every night. You keep me up every night. There ain't no satisfaction for me now. There ain't no satisfaction for me now. There ain't no satisfaction for me now. Now that you're gone, now that you're gone, now that you're gone. Now you know everything that I am. Caught in the palm, no backup plan. Baby, cut yourself loose. Cause a little trouble, don't shed a tear. Keep that sunny smile from ear to ear. And baby, cut yourself loose. I was mesmerized by your eyes. Keep me up every night. Keep me up every night. There ain't no satisfaction for me now.
The oil cooler is, it's coming together. I've got a new line drawn on this thing, and it's more of a final line that's going to allow some space for the rubber gasket. I've also taken a look at this doubler, the one that caused me so much pain to begin with, realizing I had forgotten to include it in my baffle, and it doesn't quite line up. And you know, if you ask me, I think it might have been a bit ambitious to think, with everything going on, that one doubler would work for all planes.
Oh, it's almost painful. It is painful to watch. The doubler works fine, folks. The doubler's nearly perfect. It's my positioning that's off. So if you're at this stage and you're thinking, these parts don't quite fit, they do. It's you.
I think I'm just going to recreate this out of some scrap material and just custom make it. It should only take a few minutes, and then that way it fits, and I can make the cutout for the oil cooler for the plenum wherever it needs to be.
Which is a fine plan, except then your linkage and all your geometry is off for your door, and your door doesn't fit. In my defense, it's so hard to know that all of these things interplay when you cannot mock them up until you've made some irreversible cuts in your plenum or your baffle. Anyways, we trudge on.
Speaking of the cutout, I've marked it on the back of the baffle here. That'll assist in not only recreating the doubler, but of course making said cutout. Once again, more trimming of fiberglass here. I've definitely taken my time and created a lot of dust, but in doing so, I think I've gotten a really great fit on this thing.
For me now, bring satisfaction for me now. Now that you're gone, now that you're gone, bring satisfaction for me now. Bring satisfaction for me now. Bring satisfaction for me now. Now that you're gone, now that you're gone, now that you're gone. Satisfaction for me now. Bring the satisfaction for me now. Bring the satisfaction for me now. Now that you're gone.
All right, let's talk for a second through this oil cooler. I have managed to get it to fit just a little bit better. I went through the instructions, or through the process in the instructions again, to get it seated on the engine mount. And you can see the blue tape being the edge of where it was, how it fits now. And that shift in geometry has aligned everything a little more to my liking. In fact, I'm back to using the stock doubler possibly, and that could really help out when it comes to cutting the hole in the baffling for the oil cooler door. Now, the door is something I haven't spoken about much yet, but there will be a door installed on this, and that brings up a whole conversation I had with the folks at Show Planes. Like always, I went a little overboard with my oil cooler. I have a 13 row, as I mentioned before. Likely I could have gotten away with an 11 row. While I do need a larger oil cooler because of the barely larger displacement and some of the other factors of the Titan engine, I don't need a full 13 rows, or at least under most circumstances. That means that I might struggle to get my oil up to temperature. Cold oil may not flow quite as well, not get into all the spaces it needs to, and if your oil isn't getting hot enough, you may not be burning off moisture within the oil like you should be. Therefore, Show Planes was kind enough to guide me in the right direction and say, you're gonna want an oil cooler door on this. That way, when you're flying in cold temperatures, which will be a lot of my flying, you're able to restrict the airflow to your oil cooler, thus allowing to get your temperatures up to nominal. Show Planes was very invested in not only educating me, but having this system work right, so they graciously offered to provide the oil door at no charge. I thought that was fantastic. But even better than that was the amount of information they provided on a phone call when I couldn't quite figure out exactly what I needed to order for them.
Okay, I don't mean to belabor the point, but at this point on the video, I clearly don't know that I've done things wrong, or else I wouldn't be saying things like this.
This has all gone so smoothly, but it has. The installation here,
so bear with some of my future interruptions as I point out mistakes as they happen, preventing you from doing the same, or at least hopefully. For example here, this doubler placement is going to kill me, and realistically this entire doubler and thus the door opening should be moved about 1/4 inch to 3/8 of an inch outboard. With the doubler here, I can't get the door to work, at least with the hardware provided by the kit.
There's a little more fitting work related mainly to the gasket, but not much, man. We are nearly there. This is looking good. Couple questions in my head were, can I rivet the doubler in place? That means that this sidewall also gets riveted in place, which is why you saw me assembling this in one piece to make sure I could before I added rivets back into this contraption that I just had to drill them out of. Once that's riveted, I can rivet the rest of the perimeter of the doubler, and then that is sort of settled. Then we can look at going ahead and installing the door itself and the flap mechanism. And I can bolt all of this together and final torque it, which may be a mistake because it probably has to come off at some point in the future, but I wouldn't mind calling it done for now. That's still a ways off. Let's keep moving forward.
Hey, me again. See these? Don't do this. These are wrong. These should be flush head rivets with the flush head on the aft side of the baffle. This goes for all of the rivets that hold the doubler onto the baffle. Because I did it this way, I have a chance of the shop head of these rivets interfering with the gasket of the plenum. I was going to tell you earlier, but I didn't want to interrupt the thing I had going with the music, so we're doing this now.
Well, despite my best efforts, I've fallen a little short. My door does not exactly line up with the opening, and unfortunately, there's no room for adjustment in this door mechanism. So the only thing I can think of doing is creating a custom door. Not too difficult, but I think it's what's required to get this to work. My other concern here is that my actuator arm is extremely close to the edge of my baffle, which means I can either pull it more out of alignment to give myself some room and further shift this custom door, or carve away at the edge of my baffle. In hindsight, I maybe could have pulled the whole oil cooler outboard just a little bit, because the mounts, because the holes in the mount are elongated. I just don't know that I would have seen this coming. All right, I'm gonna have to step away from that for a second. I've sailed a question in just to hear from the experts over at Show Planes and see what I've mucked up here, and how they can help get me out of it, if they can. If not, I have a pretty good idea of how to modify this a little bit, but it'd be so nice if I didn't have to stretch things too far outside of where they're supposed to be. Switching gears, I'm gonna go back to plumbing, this time manifold pressure. I now know how all of that system is supposed to be run, so I'd love to run some more tubes. First, of course, the baffling needs to come off. Manifold pressure is going to start right off of cylinder 3 on this, what I believe is a primer port here. And we'll take this plug out and put a restrictor fitting in. If you don't have a restrictor fitting, I hear your engine will run rough. Get that up there. Yeah, I sort of like that. All right, so we got our manifold pressure here. It is going to come into a 4-way contraption I'm going to build. 1 in, 3 out. 1 out will go to the sensor transducer. That's where we're going to get our manifold pressure for our instrumentation. The 2 other are going to go 1 each to the PMAX. Ideally, that's a little closer to what we're looking for. Well, I'm roadblocked a little on this one. I originally had another 45-degree elbow to get my manifold pressure into the transducer manifold. However, that fitting is smaller, and I realized that TS Flightlines had provided me a smaller elbow, but it's a 90-degree, and I cannot tighten that 90-degree without actually pulling the transducer manifold slightly away from the firewall. Not that hard, except I have a bolt head out on this side of the firewall and a nut on the inside, and I naturally need another person, so that is going to have to wait. I can, however, get the rest of this 4-way fitting tightened up, which means getting some silicone tubing going to each PMAG. A quick word before we close this one out. As mentioned, Showplanes offered me the oil cooler door at no charge. You see, they really did want to see me succeed with my installation of the oil cooler mount and have something that worked, especially considering they knew that this was going to be somewhat of a public affair. What they didn't know is that I was going to fumble the install so badly and then cut the episode before there's any resolution, and I don't think that's really fair. So I want to let you know that coming from the future, A, I do get it figured out. Eventually I pull my head out and we get it done. And B, after reviewing the instructions, I can honestly say that I share the majority of the responsibility in the way that some of these things went south. Now, I'm probably exaggerating a little bit as to how badly they went. I do think that I figured it out, but again, I do think it could have been a little more pain-free had I done some better reading of the instructions and some really careful alignment of those pieces. That said, to be fair to myself, it doesn't say how critical the alignment of the oil cooler, plenum, and doubler are in conjunction with that door. So if you are installing these kits, I urge caution, tread lightly, and move a little slower than perhaps I tend to. All right, with that said, we are closing this one out. I'm excited to have you back, hopefully next week, where we will see the conclusion of not only the oil cooler door, but a few other pieces around the airplane. Until then, thanks for watching Ryan Flies, and we'll catch you next time.
Talk to the trees, get myself a dog and